Hey guys, what's going on? Boss NASTi finally back again for another video. It's been a while. Let's see if we still got it. We're going to be taking a look at Halo Wars 2, my newfound love and passion. This is the recent BtC 2v2 tournament, semifinals Group A between Metaloid Savior going up against Jeff and PatMac. Jeff is on Pavium, PatMac on Isabel, Metaloid on YapYap, Savior on Ship, and this is Bedrock. Now, a little bit of background real quick is I am a champion player. I have placed champion multiple seasons. I do not consider myself the best, but I definitely consider myself a top player. I play with a lot of other top players, and for any of those who have played with me, you know that I don't rage, I don't get mad, I don't get angry, I'm not a dick to anyone, I don't send anyone hateful messages. I thoroughly enjoy playing with people, not only outside of my core group, but of course with my core group. And I think diversifying your palette of people you play with and perspectives that you can hear and listen to is really only a benefit to your own individual playstyle and your team playstyle as a whole, because you never know when you're going to meet someone or someone's going to say something and it may spark something or give you a good idea. And so I really try to look at those as positives, even with wins and losses. It's always good to do post-match analysis and assessment along with, even if you're going up against someone and playing them multiple times and you lose multiple times in a row. I mean, I've done that a few times myself, and you hopefully try and take those as learning experiences and improve as each game goes, and just try different things. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I want to say first and foremost, this is not going to be a pure gameplay breakdown video. It's going to be more of a tournament assessment and just some notes, along with a little bit of gameplay breakdown too as well. I'm going to try and keep it to about 15 minutes or less. So diving right in, a few areas we're going to talk about are nodes, units, scouting, battles, spectator viewing, and base development. I will be posting all of my notes in the description box below, so you're more than welcome to follow along with the description box or copy paste it into a different tab as we kind of go along. First thing I'm going to start with here is spectator viewership. Now, one of the biggest things I noticed, and the way I wanted to approach watching the semifinals and grand finals, is I wanted to look at it from the 99%. And what do I mean by the 99%? Well, that would be your beginner and intermediate level players, or just basically not your top 1% veteran players. And as a 99%er, the biggest thing you really want to get away from watching these is learning something new. You want to educate yourself. You want to try and bring yourself closer to the 1% by closing in that skill gap. And because we don't have a theater mode or ways to save or upload your recent games, which is a little bit unfortunate, but a good example I always give of a game that kind of did this right, in my opinion, is Call of Duty Black Ops 1. You were able into that game, not only did they have a fantastic theater mode, but you were able to also upload your games from the past days or even sometimes past week or two, I think, if not farther than that, and you could upload it to your player profile. And from there, other people could go into the game, search your name out, and then download your uploaded games. So this was, really actually a great thing to do, because as the 1%, they would upload stuff, and then as the 99%, you can go and download it. So you could close that skill gap in a little bit more. You could learn a lot by watching team scrims, matches, and even just looking at individual play as well. Now, because we don't have that, we have to rely a little bit more on VODs and show matches and streamers. But typically when you're streaming, you're not really focusing 100% on educational commentary. It's a lot easier to do that in a recorded show match or a tournament, and then doing kind of educational or tactical commentary over. So when I was watching the games, one of the things I noticed in the first few minutes that I just really wasn't hearing a lot was that educational commentary, that teaching, learning commentary, where, and I'll give you a good example, which is, let's say in the first few minutes, a different way of approaching it than kind of what was, than what did happen and pan out would have been if you would have had the commentators starting at one base for the first 15-20 seconds, talking about the first two slots that are coming up, along with, are they making an extra unit, where the starting unit's going, and the leader they're playing. Then you move on to the next base, and you say, okay, here's the starting slots, the leader they're playing, and any starting units that they have going in different directions. Are they making a unit from the base? Are they waypointing anywhere? And then you go to the next base and the next base, right? There's your first rotation. While that is happening, you're talking about, okay, are we going for nodes early on? Are we taking early minis? Are we getting an early scout off? Are we overloading one side of the map? Or are we sending two units to one side and then one spreading out? Maybe we're going to energy or supply. Whatever it may be. And then you do another rotation. On the second rotation, maybe the third and fourth slots are up. Maybe even the fifth slot is up. And then that way now you're adding more, because you have more information, you're now able to have a more even balanced storylines developing for each player, along with the content and the educational material you're providing for each player. And then from there, you can also say during these slower downtimes or the non-combat or non-action times, you can focus a little bit more on that kind of 99% educational commentary. And so that was just my thoughts on that. I'd love to know what you guys think on that. Again, it's just an idea that I had thought of after watching the games. Do you like that? Would you maybe do something different than what I suggested? Or was everything just okay to you? I'd love to know in the comments down below. Now we move on to the first engagement. Or scouting, I should say. I do want to talk about that because typically that comes before the first engagement. So we'll take a look here at 1:30, and as we back up, okay, we're right at 1:30. You'll notice in the bottom right corner of the minimap at the red main base, which is Metaloid, you have Jeff with the chopper doing an initial scout. He started at, I think, around 1:15, 1:20. He started sending it over there. He got a full scout out. He got 100% scout off on Metaloid's main along with the mini, and then as you see, he's going up on the tier 3 level on Bedrock. That's so he can get vision of the double mini base on the tier 2 level along with the single mini on tier 3. And so he does a full mini, he does all 5 mini base scout, and then he also gets both mains scouted. So essentially they have 100% information on what's happening, and Metaloid Savior have not scouted at this point. They do not do an initial scout, nor a scout before 4 minutes, or 4 or 5 minutes, even if it's just a main scout or expo scout. They don't do either. And so again, they don't have any information. Jeff and PatMac have 100% information. Then we move over to about the 3-minute mark here, which I'll go a little before that. And you see unit compositions for Metaloid Savior are fodder, methane wagons, grunts, some suicides, and then some heavy grunts mixed in. Jeff and PatMac, Marines, Hellbringers, choppers. Now, you'll notice a decoy being thrown down here from PatMac, and I honestly would have liked for them to stack the units and then hit the decoy, so that way you're just not hitting it on one. And some players may be wondering what I mean by that. Well, they don't view space as occupied for one team's units, so you can have a second teammate's units overlap and stack on top of that unit. So if you guys essentially click on the same area, you will overlap a good amount of your units, not all of course, but a good amount of the units, to where you could use skills such as like a hell charge, a siphon, a heavy metal, or in this case a decoy on more than just one player's units. You can use it on 2 players' units. So that I thought would have been a little bit of a tiny edge and small advantage they would have had more so going into the fight. Though as you see the fight progressing, they are slowly pushing more and more on Metaloid Savior's side. The choppers, I think, were a little bit delayed on hitting some of the suicide grunts. Like for example, you see the suicide grunt coming in there, and they did hit it right there. Could have maybe just been a few seconds earlier, or maybe they were just waiting for it to get out in front of the opposing units' troops, so that way they just didn't have to ram so far in. But there were like 2 or 3 other situations where the suicides did get to the infantry ball and were able to do some good significant damage, and the choppers just seemed like it was a little bit late reaction. I think you're going to see it happen here. You have a suicide grunt going in, really just did a number on more infantry units and even damaging some of the choppers because they were a little bit grouped up. So again, I do like the play, and I think that this unit comp did favor Jeff and PatMac over Metaloid Savior, but on a map like Bedrock, I think utilizing and taking advantage of the mini bases and kind of adapting your strategy that way, mainly because comparing it to a map like Frontier, for example, where you have to fight for mini bases in the middle and you really only have 1 mini base guaranteed, on this map you more or less have 5 mini bases guaranteed on your side. And so going in a strategy where maybe you're triple pumping choppers with the shrapnel, and then maybe you're doing a hybrid infantry pump with like Marines, Hellbringer, snipers, and we did see, I think, a few snipers mixed in, but not maybe a few more would have been a little bit more ideal, and then continuously pumping that through your T1. I really think that at that point, given how it looked at around the 5-minute mark, and even now, they easily could have had a big opportunity to get at least 1 expo and maybe even the second, or at worst case strip. And again, you could just tell based off of what Metaloid Savior kind of had left after they were just slowly trickling in the suicide grunts. The army comp at around the 5-minute mark definitely was favoring PatMac and Jeff. Then we get a little bit later, as we see now, locusts are coming out from Savior. This is another kind of interesting move that I do want to point out, which is you have the choppers are now going around to ram the locust. Now, this is a definitely good heads-up awareness play here from Jeff. He is able to ram one locust, and then he's going to get a second one. Though, in a moment, you're going to see a little bit of an overextension from the choppers, and it should be happening here in... Well, actually, I'm sorry. I fast-forwarded too much, and it just happened. Let's go... Okay. So right around here... we're going to end up going and seeing that over there by the yellow main base where the chopper's head to. So they get 2 locusts here, right? It was a 2-for-2 pure trade, and they definitely won. Shade Drop was thrown down, and the choppers, in my opinion, just overextended and overcommitted a little bit too much here. Locusts were backing up. You already did a 2-for-2 trade. Go ahead and back out. Keep some of your choppers alive, mainly because, one, choppers are very good scouting units if you keep a few alive, mixing in with your next transition comp or into your T2 comp, and you can just kind of send them around to go and do some scouting, along with still utilizing that ram ability on the locusts. So that was just kind of a small little battle that I thought definitely went in favor of Metaloid Savior, even though they did have to use a leader power. Essentially, no other units died after the second locust. Then we get into the 710, which was probably one of the last battles I'm going to talk about here, which is where you have the hogs that are going and doing some damage on the, I believe it's Savior's Expo, and they get it down to about a third health. But if you think about how much time they had hitting that before the army got there, I mean, you literally probably had, I don't even know, maybe 20 seconds, give or take, so to speak, and you were able to do a good amount of damage. They effortlessly could have just stripped that Expo and maybe went on to the main and did a little bit of stripping there, because at that point, you pretty much got a 0-for-nothing trade, where you did damage to the main, but then you have the YapYap grunt goblins come in, hit the Y, and heal the base up, right? So you literally got nothing out of that. In those situations, and in my own opinion, my kind of conservative general rule of thumb is strip over killing the main on certain instances. For example, if you don't have vision on your opponent's armies, or if you don't know if they have as many units as you do, like you don't know what the pop versus pop number is, then in those situations it's better to strip. If you do know the pop versus pop numbers and you do know where they are, then that's really a give or take. If it's an even pop number, but they're far enough away where you think you can get the main, awesome. If it's an even pop number and they're not far enough away where you can get the main, then obviously strip. If you have a pop number advantage and you think you can hold out long enough for the all-in to kill the main, then sure. Some of those things are subjective, but a lot of it comes down to scouting and just having that real-time information available when you're about to go and do a hit. Then we get to base development. One of the last things I'm going to talk about, I'm so happy I was actually keep this video shorter than normal, is 428. We have a base development or base expo coming out from Metaloid at 428. And again, while the fight is happening, at 440, we're seeing a little bit of a faster Tech 2 from Metaloid Savior than Pat and Jeff. 450, we see a Savior Expo, which is happening during the fight. And then Jeff and PatMac finally get their Expos down at 536. This is a little late for me. I mean, again, potentially a little late for both sides, depending on how many units are being pumped out. And again, that is debatable, because if they are consistently pumping 2 to 3 units at a time, then obviously you're going to see a little bit later of an expo. So you could even argue that this is an okay time for it to happen, though we'd also have to be looking by the hosts pressing the back button so we could see what the resource count looks like at certain intervals during the fights for both teams. That way we could also get a better gauge. One thing to note is that Jeff and PatMac were 1 minute 8 seconds behind Metaloid's Expo and 56 seconds behind Savior's. Another small note, PatMac, his Expo went unbuilt for 20 seconds after it came up, which was a little small note that I thought was interesting after paying attention. Build orders, I do have those out. Again, it is a little bit difficult to complete 2 of the people's build orders going into probably the first 2.5 minutes of the game, mainly just because some of the free cam roaming was going on. So I tried to do the best I could with putting some of the things together outside of the other ones that I got. Like I said, all of my notes will be in the description box down below, and I think that's probably going to end it for me. I did want to keep this video at least to 15 minutes or under. And again, I'd love to know what you guys thought on anything I mentioned or said, or just any of the thoughts that I had in general throughout the video. Again, did you like the idea for the first few minutes opening when it comes to the commentary, things that maybe you'd like to hear as the 99%. Again, I'd love to hear from kind of all areas, all sides. I'd love to hear from the 99% and even the 1% too as well, from some of the top players. Just any of your thoughts from the beginning or anything that I mentioned at all during this video. And thanks. I will be trying to potentially do some show matches and other possible more educational video breakdowns too as well, if it's something that some of y'all would like to see. And again, also for the reasoning of not just saying the idea that I'm suggesting for the first few minutes of how the commentary should go, but also doing it so there's a better idea of kind of how that would go instead of me just broadly speaking about it. So that is, I think, going to wrap it up. I do appreciate everyone checking this video out. Again, I hope you enjoyed, and that's it. Catch you next time.